Well. Hello, all. Welcome to Electionary. It's a Tuesday night. So excited to have you all with us. Tonight's going to be a great night. Our Electionary recording is brought to us by Rabbi Or Rose from the Rose Apothecary. Now, that's fun. If you're a Schitt's Creek fan, you'll understand that humor. We have Or Rose. He's a rabbi out of Hebrew College in Massachusetts. Brandon's going to start us out with some music. Dan Dietrich is here. Bridget Barkin. Amy's got a reflection for us. Shane has a prayer, and it's going to be a good night. So we're really glad to have you here with us. A couple of announcements sort of as we get started, and that is through August, we're going to run versions of Electionary. And then in September, because Vote Common Good's going to be back on the road doing outdoor socially distancing events, including with our new For the Common Good face masks, which I feel like wearing like Joe Biden tonight. We're going to be not only on Tuesday nights having some programming for you online, but most nights of the week we're going to be doing events all across Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, and we're going to be coming to you live from all of those places. So Michael Waters on Tuesday nights is going to be leading a class on race and reckoning and engagement in our country. Much more coming about that in coming weeks, so we're super excited about that. So for the next few weeks, we're going to have our typical electionary pattern, and then we're going to be picking up with some of that special programming on Tuesday nights and our From the Road, Vote Common Good, Faith, Hope, and Love for a Change on Election Day tour. So couldn't be more excited. If you're in those states, we'd love to see you out at any of our events if you're comfortable, or you can join us online. We'll be live streaming as many of them as we absolutely can. So really good to have you here tonight. Electionary, a biblical reflection for this election, and we're going to be serenaded tonight, as I mentioned, first by Brandon, and then we'll hear from Daniel and Bridget in a little bit. So, hey, Brandon.
Where is the justice we need? Where is the justice we need? I walk to the street and I began to see, that the justice we need is the justice that needs me. Where is the healing we need? Where is the healing we so badly need? I turned on my TV, I saw so much dis-ease. Oh, and the healing we need is the healing that needs me. I phoned an old friend, I said sorry for the grief, oh, and the peace we all need is the peace that needs me. Oh, and the healing we need is the healing needs me. Oh, and the justice we need
Hey, that is Brandon Pfeiffer. Hey, Brandon, that song has that sound that people will feel like, man, why do I not know that song? Where does that song come from? And it might be because you wrote it 3 weeks ago. Is that right?
Well, that's true. It might be because I subconsciously stole it from someone else and I haven't figured out who yet. But for now, we'll go with the fact that I wrote it 3 weeks ago on a
Yeah.
night just a few minutes before doing another event with Shane and Abe and a few other folks. So
Yeah, an event with death penalty action
Yeah.
and a call out for justice. And in your place there in Chicago wrote that song, and now it's going around around the internet, and soon it's going to be traveling on a bus across the country.
Right, that's right.
People singing it live where we
right,
find
right.
ourselves. So such a great thought. Thanks for being with us tonight. We ask someone every week to give us a moment to recognize where we find ourselves, how we find ourselves in this world. We like to call it the where we find ourselves segment of the Electionary. And Amy Sullivan's been willing to do that for us tonight. Hey, Amy.
So this week, like a lot of people, I've been thinking about John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who passed away last Friday and who has been a model of bravery and passion and public service for so many of us. And it struck me today when I was thinking about this segment that it was a year ago this week that I was last in DC and that I last saw him. I've been in a number of meetings over my couple of decades in DC with Congressman Lewis, but never actually spoke to him one-on-one. And I was walking down the street in Capitol Hill last summer and saw him, and it was one of those god-awful weeks when it was like 105 degrees the entire week. And he looked so tired, and I just couldn't bother him. I really wanted to just shake his hand. But you know what? It is enough to have been inspired by him. And one of the things, it's one of his most famous phrases, but one of the things I love and have tried to really take in from him is the idea of making good trouble. I think a lot of us, and particularly a lot of us who are women, have been socialized to make other people comfortable and to not make trouble. And we get praised for smoothing things over and for being able to keep a mask on when we are offended or upset. And one of the really powerful lessons more and more people have been taking over the past 3-4 years is that that's always in somebody else's interest. If people are telling you it's not polite to say, talk about politics and religion among company, well, that's because they have an interest in making sure that your voice isn't heard on those subjects. And I think right now is a good time for us to all kind of gird ourselves to make some good trouble. Not just because we have about 100 days left, give or take, between now and the election, but because we don't know that election day will be the end of things. We have heard over and over, and he seems to relish kind of putting it out there from President Trump, the idea that if he loses on election night, he might not concede. He might not step down. This week, we're seeing on the streets of Portland federal troops that have been sent in against the wishes of local leaders. In Chicago right now, we've got troops coming into the city against the wishes of the state's governor and against the Chicago mayor's wishes. I want to be careful to walk the line between not sounding paranoid and being realistic. Because what I was also mindful of in thinking about being in DC a year ago is the fact that I had a chance to meet up with a lot of friends and colleagues. A bunch of them happened to be very smart, compassionate white dudes, almost all of whom, because this was when Democrats were still fighting it out to figure out who was going to be the nominee, almost all of whom told me they were worried about how far some of the more liberal Democrats wanted to push things, about how outspoken they were being on, say, race issues. And all of whom at some point said something to me like, it's not that he's been great, but Trump really hasn't actually been as bad as I thought he was going to be. And what I heard is Trump hasn't been as bad for people like me as I had feared. And that can only be spoken from a place of a very secure position and privilege. And it's that awareness that I want to call us all out to right now, because again, there are social constraints to try to make us just go along. It is almost a religion in Washington, the way people want to put their faith in institutions to save us, and to rally around the idea of civility. And I can already picture in my mind the way people would call us to, for the good of the country, be the mother in the tale about King Solomon who gives up the baby because we don't want to tear the country apart. And I'm sorry, but it is not our fault that the other side is willing to kill the baby. We have to be ready to make good trouble. And it's for us, but it's more importantly, it's for our neighbors. And that's what we've been talking about a lot here at Vote Common Good this year, is how much voting is an act of love for our neighbors, and being willing to speak up and to put ourselves in the way and to protest when there are times to protest is going to be another way for us to love our neighbors. And whether it's following opportunities to do that through your local indivisible group or Move On, or we here will do our best to connect you with local efforts as much as possible. I would just implore us all, even as we're focused on Election Day, to be realists and understand that if the last 4 years have taught us anything, it's that the institutions we thought we could rely on are not infallible. And there are no grown-ups in charge. It turns out we are the grown-ups. And we need to be strong and of good courage. And as Congressman Lewis taught us his entire life, be prepared to make good trouble.
Well, thank you, Amy. That is so well said and so well thought through. A chance for all of the panelists here to respond. I was just struck by that comment, that which from my Christian tradition would say it as, do nothing out of selfish ambition or self-conceit, but consider others as you live your life. And this idea that even our voting is not in our self-interest, or even our, as you put it so well, our self-policing and self-quieting is not something we should do for our own self-interest. That people will say to us, well, it's just easier, or it's better if you just don't engage in so many ways. It's better for your, I'm a pastor from the pastoring profession, and all of my colleagues are saying, it's just not really what I want to do to speak out about these issues. It doesn't basically serve me well in my role and in my job. And at some point, your conscience, or for me, my Christian faith, calls me to something higher even than my own job responsibilities or than my own self-care for how a government is going to only treat people like me. And it's a deep, deep calling that we have. And so I just appreciate so much you're drawing our attention to that. Other panelists, thoughts that you have about what Amy said, or what it raised up for you?
So I'll jump in. Thank you for that, Amy. That was beautiful and very moving. When you were sharing it, I was reminded of an article that our friend Stephanie Spalding wrote recently, in which she said, it's too late to be allies. We need to be accomplices. And, and particularly it was written for white people. And for too many of us, we spent a lot of our time being allies and sitting back and letting other people do the hard work. And it's time for all of us to stand up, like John Lewis did. That's the message we can always get from John Lewis. And I'll just share my quick memory of John Lewis. About 6 years ago, we organized a hunger fast in Washington, D.C. to protest immigration. We did a 30-day hunger fast. And I was one of the people fasting. And John Lewis came over to the tent several times. And one of the times he came to the tent, I actually got to sit down with him alone for about 15 minutes, just talking. He just came over and just started talking to me about why I was fasting and things like that. And I'll never forget that. It was worth doing a 13-day hunger fast just to get 15 minutes alone with John Lewis there. So let's just remember that we don't want to be allies. We don't need allies. We need accomplices.
Nice. Thanks for that, Patrick.
I think, Amy, you are brilliant, and you really hit the nail on the head. And I appreciate your comments. And Patrick, you're right. Allies, no more accomplices. We really need to find ways to work our way around this force. One thing that occurred to me in the last day or so is I watched Trump trying to take over the streets and set the precedent for election violence and whatever else he has up his sleeve. Is that if I had any way to reach into the Biden campaign and the people running that effort, I would want to suggest to them that they actually try to communicate with the people who are protesting and try to divert that energy into getting the vote out and leave the streets. It's not an easy thing to suggest at a time when there's such a need to express your feelings, but that could lead to something that none of us want to contemplate. So that if there's less of that and there's more of the focus on getting people to vote, maybe that would be a more practical way to approach it. So if anybody, I'd like to hear anybody's thoughts or suggest to anybody who has any kind of inroad to all of those people to bring that up as a possibility.
Well, we'll let people think on that, and I'll just say, Howard, and I think that's a good call. I've been on a number of calls with people in the campaign and all, and it's curious because it's easy to think that a campaign kind of has the power or has the influence, has the sway. They're asking the same thing of people like all of us, like, hey, could you guys all organize something and get moving out there and let us know about it and come around it? And I think we're just in that all of the above, all hands on deck moment where it really does take all of us doing this kind of organizing. And so I think people that have the impulse that you're raising to reach out to the campaign should. And I also think they should organize something and put it together. Just as one example, Vote Common Good and Red Letter Christians and Faith in Action and a number of other groups are putting together a march from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C., August 20th through the 28th. And on the 28th, we're walking into Washington to join in the anniversary of the March on Washington. And on the 28th of August, it's a Friday, we're asking people around the country to hold a march in their own hometowns that carry the same list of demands to our government and the same list of calls to our faith communities to engage issues of anti-Blackness and race and politics. And we want that march, along with all the other marches, to culminate in what Martin Luther King 56 years ago called the March on the Ballot Box. And we hope that all of those streams of all the marches and all the protests and all the walks, that they were training in some ways to get this action to happen on Election Day, so that the voices that need to be heard in this country are heard. And then we find out who we are and where we are and how we are as a country, if people are engaged in those ways. So I think it's great encouragement, Howard. Thanks a lot. Anyone else have a comment for us on what Amy shared before we get to our electionary video for the night?
Thank you, Amy. It was really something we needed to hear, and it's very sort of defragmenting, like knowing where we are, kind of a feel to that. And I'm trying to figure out what would be good trouble that I can put myself to, and I am, enraged. I am despondent, sometimes depressed. I want to speak, more like yell. But then thinking about, like, one of the things that what Common Good is going to do is in North Carolina, go to North Carolina. I was reading research about younger, infrequent voters, people who might voted for Trump, but they don't know what to do next, and they are trying to find an excuse to step out of that and come into a more common good kind of voting while saving their face. And the research was saying that what really is hard for them is to face our anger and our mocking about their past vote. And that's for them, they're talking in terms of, like, they love conversation about unity, conversation about common American goals, and all of that. I'm feeling like, oh, that's all fluff. You got to repent, sister. Like, you got to crawl on all four now and ask for forgiveness, like but I'm not them. So I think a good fight for me is do to others what you want others to do to you, and find a gracious way for them to step over that line without us making them smaller or I don't know, with different dynamics to step over. Same way people come to church, to the altar, you don't put them down. So finding a way to do that. So I'm struggling how to muster kindness in myself and grace. I'm fighting for that, to be able to do that. I'm really like not going far so far. But
Yeah, thank you, Samir. Really appreciate that. And the hanging pots over your left shoulder are a great accent to those comments. So thanks for that as well.
Yeah, most important things first.
That's right. That's right. Dan Dietrich's one of our musicians tonight, Dan, and then you have a chance to meet Or Rose and then hear from Or. So, hey, Dan.
Hey, Sammer, that reminded me of a conversation I had today. I mentioned to a friend that I was getting back out on the road with Vote Common Good, and I was excited about that. And he's like, "Oh, that's your anti-Trump thing, right?" And I was like, "Well, it's actually a pro-faith, hope, and love thing, and that just puts us at odds with Trump at this current moment." But I thought I'd play this song that's based on the prayer of St. Francis, and it's by a band called The Brilliance. And if you want, I'll read the prayer of St. Francis and then sing this song. If you want to just close your eyes and receive this prayer, take a deep breath. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. And I would add, where there is injustice, justice. O Creator, grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
You heard the cry of our hearts, and you came down. Freely you gave us your love. Showing us how let me shine bright, and may your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts. May your light cause us to shine so bright that we bring hope into the dark. All that we do without love, it means nothing. Grant us the courage to give, as your call. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. And where there is darkness, let me shine light. And may your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts. May your light cause us to shine so bright that we bring hope into the dark. Hope for the hopeless, your love is. Strength in our weakness, your love is. May we love as you love. May we love, love as you love. May we love as you love.
Right on. Thank you, Dan Dietrich, South Bend, Indiana. Hey, our electionary nights are centered around music and calling and what we're doing so far, but they're also built around someone giving us a biblical reflection for this election. And so each week we ask someone to make a recording, and we pass those along separately. And Orr Rose is our electionary commentator for tonight. So super excited, Orr, for you to be here with us. And I had the privilege of watching your video already, and it's tremendous. So thank you. Or if you want to say a word or two about what you do, you can tell people about Hebrew College and many of us in Vote Common Good have been conspiring together and been accomplices in some goodness in this world, including a project that Orr's going to mention, but I just want to amplify it now. It's called Psalm Season, and there's a chance for you to connect to that. And you can, he'll tell you about the website where you can go. And it's similar to this, but it's people reflecting on a psalm together in community from around the country and frankly around the world. And it's a genius project, really important, birthed out of this very moment, put together, in the time that we find ourselves right now. And so it's really great. So glad to have you with us here. I like to say again, because we've done events with you before. So really good to have you part of this with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's an honor to be with you and the Vote Common Good community. And I felt privileged, frankly, to be able to share words of Torah, words from the book of Psalms, in this case, Psalm 114, with this passionate group of upstanders. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the courageous, thoughtful, and compassionate work you're doing. It feels like just yesterday that we welcomed the Vote Common Good bus to Hebrew College in Newton, Massachusetts. And on the other hand, of course, it feels like eons. The world has changed so dramatically. So even though we are connecting tonight virtually, it feels like a tremendous bracha. It feels like a tremendous blessing to be with friends and co-conspirators from across the country. So thank you.
You bet. All right, here we go. This is Rabbi Or Rose. Thanks for sharing tonight. Enjoy all.
Shalom. My name is Rabbi Or Rose, and I serve as the director of the Miller Center for Interreligious Learning and Leadership of Hebrew College in Boston. It's an honor to join the Vote Common Good community for this week's installment of Electionary. Approximately 2 months ago, while still very much reeling from the anxiety and uncertainty of the pandemic, I decided that I wanted to explore the biblical book of Psalms anew, and to do so in community. This collection of beautiful, gritty, desperate, and stirring prayer poems has served as a source of consolation and inspiration for countless numbers of Jews, Christians, and other seekers throughout the ages. Not only does it serve as the foundational text for much of our formal liturgies, it has also been a go-to text for individuals and communities in trying times throughout the ages. And so I reached out to my dear friend and colleague, Reverend Paul Rauschenbusch of the Interfaith Youth Corps, and together we launched Psalm Season, an online encounter with the wisdom of the Psalms. The project has an 18-week horizon, as 18 is the numerical equivalent of the Hebrew word for life, Chai. Each week, we invite a diverse group of religious leaders, cultural critics, musicians, poets, artists, and activists, including several wonderful folks from Vote Common Good, to explore one psalm from different perspectives, bringing these time-worn texts into dialogue with life in the here and now. Last week, the 6th week in our 18-week cycle, I had the privilege of writing a reflection with my mentor and friend, Ruth Messenger. Ruth, former president of the American Jewish World Service, is a true social justice shero who has inspired a generation or more of Jewish activists to engage in local and global efforts to repair our beautiful and broken world. Our assigned text was Psalm 114. Here are the 8 verses of this imaginative poem. When Israel went forth from Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people of strange speech, Judah became his holy one, Israel his dominion. The sea saw them and fled, Jordan ran backward, mountains skipped like rams, hills like sheep. What alarmed you, O sea, that you fled, Jordan that you ran backward, mountains that you skipped like rams, hills like sheep? Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rock into a pool of water, the flinty rock into a fountain. Psalm 114 is best known among Jewish readers as one of the Hallel, or praise psalms, which are recited on various occasions, including Passover, the annual celebration of the Exodus. Psalm 114 itself most likely dates from the exilic or post-exilic period, that is after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. This dating suggests that the Psalms poet meant for the exodus from Egypt to inspire those exiled in Babylon long ago. The key message of Psalm 114, which is a fascinating example of intra-biblical exegesis, is that the natural world was intimately involved in the epic tale of liberation. As our ancestors moved through the wilderness, the mountains and the waters stood on their heads. For the psalmist, these dramatic reactions from the natural world are indications of the interconnection of all life and the presence of a force that stands behind both liberation and the workings of nature. Like the ancient Israelites, we are living in absolutely frightening times. It is so hard to know where we stand in our own Exodus story. Globally, we are beset by a severe pandemic that is proving to be very difficult to control, stymieing even the best of scientists and healthcare professionals. Nationally, we are seeing ugly evidence of the ongoing plague of systemic racism that we have allowed to simmer for far too long, now boiling up in ways that newly demand our attention. Making the situation all the more dangerous and dire is the fact that our president and his associates refuse to address these issues in honest and straightforward ways, informed by science and research, opting instead to use what the psalmist might describe euphemistically as strange speech. Needless to say, the journey to the promised land is far from over. There is much more work for us to do, from mask wearing and quarantining to broad social and environmental reform. Nonetheless, as our poet insists, salvation is possible. The path will be rough and uneven, to be sure. The obstacles may seem insurmountable at times, but we must summon our best selves, work in solidarity with others willing to work for justice and peace, support honest and hardworking public servants, and step forward to lead ourselves when necessary. In the U.S. context, it means using the precious tools of democracy, including our power to vote for those elected officials that we believe can help create a safer, more equitable, and compassionate society. It also requires elevating the political discourse to focus on when and where we can work together across partisan divides, and when and how to debate both vigorously and humanely. As we think deeply about the changes we need to make in our country and throughout the world, we must also begin to reimagine our relationship to nature. Like humankind, Mother Earth is in a vulnerable and pained state and needs our care. And we need her in order to survive and thrive. While we do not yet fully understand the relationship of the pandemic to the environmental crisis, we do know that the health and well-being of humanity and of the planet are utterly inseparable. We should be startled by the reports of improved air and water quality in our time of quarantine. Are these any less dramatic signs of our interconnection than the psalmist's description of the mountains and the seas? What will it take for humankind and the rest of the natural order to both thrive simultaneously? In this extended period of social distancing, soul-searching, and protest, we would be wise to spend more time outdoors, enjoying, even if fleeting, the peace and tranquility of our natural environments, reconnecting to the earth and listening carefully for the still small voice of the one who calls us.
Well, thank you, Or. Really great. And thanks for being outside and practicing what you preached. That is tremendous. Here's our prayer, and then we'll respond.
Yeah, thanks for that reflection. I look forward to engaging it with the rest of you. This prayer, Katie, my wife, and I have been reading the Gospel of Luke, And I've just been struck by what a contrast there is between Christ and so many of the things that we see in this administration. And so I wrote this prayer today thinking about Jesus. Jesus, give us your compassion so that we might weep over our nation as you wept over Jerusalem. Give us your righteous indignation that we might flip tables as you flipped tables in the temple. Give us your mercy that we might forgive our enemies like you forgave those who nailed you to the cross. Give us your imagination that we might pull money out of the mouth of a fish as you did for the tax collectors. And give us your creativity that we might heal with mud and spit and the things that we have at hand when others say we've never done it that way. Give us your courage that we might call out self-righteousness and power like you did when you called the religious charlatans a brood of vipers. And give us your humility that we might subvert power structures by carrying a towel and washing people's feet. Give us your perseverance that we might press on even when our friends betray us, when our enemies surround us, and when all we feel like saying is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And give us finally your love, that we might wear evil down with that powerful love, that we might make our enemies our friends and invite everyone into your revolution. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right, peoples on the panel, any responses to Bridget, Shane, or mostly to Rabbi Orr?
I'll go. I think that connection between the earth and our well-being, it's so easy, since we're in the middle of a pandemic, to just sort of shrink our focus to humanity and the nearest people around us, sort of as a safety measure. But just the reminder that we are so connected to creation, and right now, the EPA is being just torn apart from the inside, and it's like this crisis is being used as cover to roll back all these protections for our environment, and it's easy for that to get lost in the mix and all the other huge headlines that come out every day. So thanks for that reminder.
Thank you, Daniel. Hey, Orr, I've got a question for you. You said this was traditionally or often used as a prayer psalm. That surprises me a bit. I mean, I heard it twice today, but it doesn't feel that way to me. Do you have any thoughts on that? Anything more than you wanted that you said in the video?
Sure. Psalm 114 is a part of a cluster of psalms, 113 through 118, that are recited together on various sacred occasions. And of course, part of the foundational story of the Jewish people and anyone and everyone that feels connected to the story of the ancient Israelites is the Exodus, and the ways in which we as slaves are freed and then are responsible to ask in every generation, who has not yet tasted the sweetness of freedom? Who is still in the midst of oppression? And how can we possibly do something to try and alleviate that? And so one of the times where that psalm is said with great gusto, of course, is on Pesach, is on Passover, where we commemorate and celebrate in a very embodied way the hope and the promise of that ancient story.
Well, that's terrific. Thanks. Thanks for that clarification. Anyone else?
I'll jump in, and thank you, Rabbi, for that beautiful reflection. But I will say it's almost like you and Dan planned this out ahead of time, because he read the prayer of St. Francis, and I'm part of the Franciscan family, so you made me feel right at home here. That was awesome. But it also reminded me that and as part of the Franciscan teaching, we sometimes feel that our goal here is to be in right relationship with God, And then after we become in right relationship with God, we can then work on being in right relationship with all of God's creation. When in fact, what God tells us is to be in right relationship with God, we first have to be in right relationship with all of God's creation. And then and only through that can we be in right relationship with God. So we sort of turned our theology upside down. But thanks for bringing it back home to us again.
Thanks, Patrick. Anyone else have a response for us?
Just that the last word that the rabbi shared with us about the responsibility, once you have been freed, to think on those who are not yet free, really does tie in with the reflections that we have been sharing around our responsibilities to our neighbors. And as you said earlier tonight, Doug, rejecting the impulse to stick with selfish concerns. I think one of the scams that the Republican Party and its enablers among conservative Christians has had going for a long time is that they have assured people that, of course, you want to love your neighbors and care about your neighbors, but your first priority is, of course, and should be taking care of yourself and your own, those closest to you. And once that's done, and only once that's done, can you afford to care about the common good and make that your priority, particularly when it comes to political priorities. And the beauty of that is that there is always another threat to invent or to introduce, so that the moment at which you should care about the common good and you're free to make that your priority, it never comes, because there's always something to be concerned about. And this kind of flips it on its head, saying as soon as you are free, that very moment, that is when the priority should become those who are not yet.
Brilliant and fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Hey, thanks for being a part of this tonight. I feel like we, 4 months ago, we launched into Electionary because it was the response that made sense for us to be at home. And the way we're figuring out as a society to live with this implications of this virus, what to me feels like having to do so without any level of significant government and federal level leadership is a real problem for all of us. But it feels like we've kept ourselves alive and kept ourselves going as a nation, as a people. And as Amy mentioned before, just over 100 days from now, we have a choice about how we're going to be as a people. And our call is for faith, hope, and love to bring about a change on Election Day and to bring an end to this administration and to the pain, the hazard that it brings to so many people on this planet and in this country, and to welcome all those in who have had a change of heart, and even those who haven't. One of the great teachings of the Christian tradition that I hold so closely to is that you do love your neighbor, that you do love your God, that you do love yourself, and you love those opposed to you, your enemy, equally as well, and that you don't hold back on any generosity of love for any. So there's much work to do for us in our lives, in our faith, in our civic life, and in our engagement with one another. And not only are we on this planet together, as the psalm taught us, not only are we in this world together, as we all know, but that we are bound to one another, neighbor and enemy alike. So we need to set those things aside and build a world of a more beloved community. So thank you for all being a part of all of this, and we'll do all the work we can. If you're new to Vote Common Good, we're so glad to have you. Lots of ways to be involved. We invite you to adopt a state, pick one of the 6 swing states that we're going to be involved in. Join us in all the ways online. Go to votecommongood.com. And by the way, these electionaries are available to you after they're done, not only on an audio version on our podcast, but people can always watch anything that we do live online on our website over at votecommongood.com. So you don't have to be on Facebook. You don't have to know how to, have a YouTube account. You don't have to be logged into Zoom. So if there's people who would be interested in watching this, they can go to votecommongood.com, watch it live when it happens, or watch the recordings of it when it's done. So super glad to have you all here on this night. And Bridget, if you would you take us out with another song from that guitar and that voice from that place in Brooklyn?
I'm actually gonna sing something a cappella, if you don't mind. It's actually a song that my dad wrote, and if you don't know, my dad just passed away a couple months ago, but he was a true lover and fighter for all things good and true. And this is called Leaves Upon the Same Old Tree. Who am I and who are you? Tell me what you're going through. I'll be glad to listen to all your stories. I've been here and you've been there, but it seems we're both nowhere. Shall we laugh or shed a tear for our lost glories? I'm the wind and you're the rain. I'm the sky and you're the sea now. Who knows how or why we came? We're leaves upon the same old tree. Sometimes lost and sometimes found. Seems we're always losing ground, but aren't we lucky just to be around through all this crying, traveling near and traveling far, reaching for some distant star, finding out just who we are. We're still trying. I'm the wind and you're the rain. I'm the sky and you're the sea now. Who knows how or why we came? We're leaves upon the same old tree.
What a great way to finish this great night. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you to all of you. And we'll see you down the road, and we'll see you on Election Day.